History is often written as a list of conquerors and battles. Empires rise, cities fall, power is taken by force. But some of the greatest victories in human history were not won with swords. They happened in quiet moments. Moments when someone refused to follow cruelty. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is simply choose to be human. In 539 BC, Babylon, one of the greatest cities on earth, was conquered. Most conquerors would celebrate victory by enslaving the population and destroying their culture. But Cyrus the Great chose something different. Instead of oppression, he offered freedom. He allowed people to keep their religions, their traditions, their identities. Among them were the Jewish people, who were allowed to return home after years of exile. The famous Cyrus Cylinder is often described as the first charter of human rights. At a time when empires were built on fear, Cyrus built his on respect and redefined what it meant to conquer. On the Cyrus Cylinder, his words echo through history. I returned the sacred cities and restored their sanctuaries. But history would soon show that power is not only held by kings. Sometimes courage appears in those who challenge the system itself. Bartolomé de las Casas did not start as a hero. He was a colonist, a slave owner, a man who built his life on the conquest of others. But then he witnessed the cost of his comfort, the screams of the indigenous people, the encomienda system, a cruel machine of exploitation. Las Casas did something few have the strength to do. He looked in the mirror and hated what he saw. He freed his slaves and turned against his own kind. For 50 years, he fought the Spanish Empire, calling their conquest a cruel tyranny. But he was a man of his time, not a saint. He sought to save their bodies, yet still demanded their souls for his church. He traded one form of control for another. Still, he wrote a truth that shook the world. All the peoples of the world are humans. It takes courage to stand against an empire, but it takes even more to admit that you were part of the darkness. Because true change isn't just about freeing others. It's about the painful battle of undoing yourself. But sometimes courage is not about speaking. Sometimes it's about standing still, while everything around you collapses. In 1937, the city of Nanjing became one of the darkest chapters of the 20th century. Violence spread through the streets. Civilians were hunted. Homes were destroyed. Entire families disappeared. And yet, in the middle of this chaos, one man chose to act. John Rabe, a German businessman. Ironically, a member of the Nazi Party. But when the massacre began, he used his influence to create something extraordinary. A safety zone, a place where civilians could hide. Inside that zone, nearly 200,000 Chinese civilians survived. In his diary, he wrote, "I have no choice but to do what I can." In a time when fear ruled everything, he stood between violence and innocence. History is complicated, but sometimes, even within dark systems, individual choices still matter. No hero speech, no grand declaration, just a decision. And in the middle of horror, that was enough. Yet there are moments in history when courage means something even more terrifying. Not protecting from the outside, but walking directly into darkness. In 1940, one man made a decision almost impossible to understand. He volunteered to be captured by the Nazis. His name was Witold Pilecki. His mission was simple: find out what was happening inside Auschwitz and send the truth to the outside world. Inside the camp, he organized resistance. Secret networks formed. Information was smuggled out. Pilecki wrote some of the first reports about the Holocaust. But when those reports reached the Allies, many could not believe them. The truth seemed too horrific. Later, he said, I was trying to live as if I were already dead. After more than 2 years in the camp, he escaped, not for fame, not for recognition, but because someone had to tell the world what was happening. But sometimes the fate of the world does not depend on war. It depends on one decision, one moment, one person saying no. October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. The world stood on the edge of nuclear war, deep underwater, inside a Soviet submarine. The crew believed war had already begun. They prepared to launch a nuclear torpedo. The decision required 3 officers. 2 agreed. 1 refused. Vasily Arkhipov. He believed something was wrong, that the signals they received were not proof of war. And he held his ground. Because of that single decision, the torpedo was never launched, and the world never entered nuclear war. Sometimes history changes, not with action, but with restraint. But courage is not always about global events. Sometimes it happens in a single moment, when someone decides to protect strangers. During the Vietnam War, in 1968, something terrible happened in the village of My Lai. Civilians were being killed. Unarmed people, families, children. From the air, helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson saw what was happening. He made an extraordinary decision. He didn't fight his enemies. He fought his own comrades to save a village of strangers. He landed his helicopter between American soldiers and Vietnamese civilians. Then he ordered his crew to aim their weapons at their own side if the killings continued. He saved lives that day. Years later, he said, "If you see something wrong, you have to stop it." But when he returned home, he was called a traitor. Decades later, in 1998, Thompson was finally recognized as hero and awarded the Soldier's Medal, the highest U.S. Army honor for bravery not involving conflict with an enemy. But some heroes never carried weapons. Their courage looked very different, and yet they saved millions. In 1940, in Lithuania, thousands of Jewish refugees were trapped. Nazi forces were advancing. Escape seemed impossible, but Japanese diplomat Chiune Sugihara decided to act. His government ordered him to stop issuing visas. He refused. For weeks, he wrote visas by hand, 18 to 20 hours a day. Even as he was forced to leave the country, he continued writing from a train window and handing documents to desperate families. Later, he said, "I may have to disobey my government, but if I don't, I would be disobeying God." More than 6,000 people escaped because of him, and their descendants today number in the tens of thousands. Sugihara lost his career, but he saved lives, and he never regretted it. Some heroes stand between armies. Others stand between life and death in silence. And sometimes they do it for decades. James Harrison was not a soldier. He never fought in a war. But for 60 years, he did something extraordinary. He donated blood. Every week, his blood contained a rare antibody that could save babies from a deadly disease called rhesus disease. Because of his donations, more than 2.4 million babies survived. He never asked for money. He never sought fame. He once said, "It's just something I can do." He simply showed up, again, and again, and again. Sometimes heroism is not dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet persistence. History often remembers conquerors, but humanity moves forward because of people like these. People who refuse cruelty, people who choose courage, people who decide that even in the darkest times, doing the right thing still matters, because in the end, the true heroes of history are not those who had the most power, but those who chose to use it for good.